What's the latest on the guy who they're trying to extradite from Spain?
Oh, yeah. So there's two big crypto cases. So one is Crypto.com has brought suit against the Biden administration and the SEC. And the other is the continued escalation of the extradition efforts against Roger Ver, colloquially known as Bitcoin Jesus. Leave it to the Biden administration to try to figure out a way to crucify Bitcoin Jesus. So for those that don't know who Roger Ver is one of the founders of the Bitcoin movement. It sort of was a Bitcoin purist. And it was someone who believed in Bitcoin, not for its self-enrichment prospects, but rather for its collective empowerment and individual freedom components. That if you really understood what Bitcoin was at core, there was the aspect I'm talking about, monetizing and incentivizing people to explore alternative ideas about the world that would let them go down Alice in Wonderland's rabbit hole, that allow them to take the Matrix red pill and see past the simulation. But the broader aspect of it was its capacity to functionally revolutionize the world and remove financial control from central banks and central planners. Indeed, any central intermediary at all, because it's based on democratizing, decentralizing currency and individually empowering through open source blockchain technology the means of exchange. And if you do that, you take away the ability of the banks to monitor you, to control you, to govern you, to censor you. You take away the ability of the central planners to monitor you, control you, censor you, take away the value of your labor, or depreciate the value of a product, inflate the cost of a product. All those things can go away if all of a sudden the central planners don't monopolize it anymore. And that's why Bitcoin was always this brilliant, beautiful, revolutionary tool by today's Thomas Paine getting it. And it was a lot of the younger generation that over the last half decade has embraced it. So the reason why Roger Ver is called Bitcoin Jesus is because he has been the principal supporter and promoter of the democratized decentralization effect of Bitcoin as a means of exchange. Many years ago, he got harassed way back. I mean, this guy's been harassed over and over again. He did a little bit of time. Somebody's like, "Oh, Barnes, you don't know. He did time in federal prison." I was like, "Oh, I'll have to look that up." Guess what it was? Firecrackers. The wrong size firecrackers. Can you imagine the U.S. government spend money and time to imprison Roger Ver over firecrackers? Firecrackers. I mean, that's how nuts our government is. He did time in federal prison over firecrackers, about whether it was this regulation to fit that side, fit that. Unbelievable. After that experience with the U.S. government, Roger Ver decided, I think I'm going to choose a different government citizenship rather than the United States. So he does. And then all of a sudden, the U.S. government comes in last year and indicts him, wants to put him in prison for 20 plus years, wants to effectively bankrupt him, seeks his extradition from Spain, the same place John McAfee ended up dead in a jail cell, ended up getting Epsteined. And by the way, McAfee himself predicted that would happen to him if he was ever jailed. He said, watch, I'll get Epsteined. Our friend Amanda Milius, daughter of the great director John Milius, is making a documentary on John McAfee's life as licensed by his wife, his widow. It's already suspect that they're indicting Ver to begin with because he's Bitcoin. So it's a coincidence this guy's Bitcoin Jesus? It's a coincidence this guy is promoting. Not only that, not long after the indictment, kind of got a sense of why he got indicted, his book got published. And his book is about fighting the intelligence community on trying to co-opt and depress Bitcoin. So now things are starting to fit together a little bit better. So the political motivation is obvious. What was shocking is when I read the indictment. I'm expecting something, it's like all the Trump cases, right? You expect they put up such a microscopic view on a guy. Surely that they got, the something significant, something real, something substantial.
Look, not to oversimplify it, but the bottom line is that it's alleged that he sold Bitcoin to his companies or transferred.
Well, here's the thing that should scream out to people. They're indicting him on things about paying taxes as a citizen for things that happened when he was not a U.S. citizen. So that was the thing that stood out right away. So someone who's not a U.S. citizen didn't make money in the United States, and you're saying they owe a bunch of tax on what they did with their own property outside the United States?
And just so nobody thinks you're crazy, this is from the DOJ's website or Justice Department. February 14, he allegedly obtained citizenship.
Allegedly. They know he obtained citizenship on that date. But this is the U.S. government. They try to pretend he didn't do something when they denied him a visa a year later because they recognized that he was no longer a U.S. citizen. But they have to say allegedly because their whole thing is they're using the Roger Ver case primarily to suppress Bitcoin, suppress the people pushing for Bitcoin as an independent platform as part of the broader Biden administration lawfare against Bitcoin. But that's only half of the equation. The other half of the equation is they want to use the Roger Ver case to establish extraordinary power. It's kind of like the Amos Miller case, but in the financial freedom context. They're using him to say, we can put you in prison and create new tax policy through criminal law enforcement against individuals, even if you're not a U.S. citizen. We're going to claim you owe taxes and we can lock you up for it. Now, citizenship is not a limitation on your tax power. I mean, that has all kinds of ramifications. That's not even the least offensive. There's two other components that are equally offensive. One is they're saying, what exactly is Bitcoin? So in this, they're saying Bitcoin is a capital asset that's treated like capital gains, or what is it? You dig in and they're wanting to tax Bitcoin not as a capital asset, not as an income stream, as a property tax. They're saying you owned this much property, and at some point you benefited from that ownership of property. So we're going to say that you didn't pay enough at the time of the exit tax, which, by the way, is a disguised property tax. And now we're going to put you in prison. So we're going to create a property tax through the exit tax, and we're going to enforce it through criminal means. So this is an effort. They've been trying to do this for a while, but this is what the Harris proposal is. It's a property tax. For those that don't know, in the United States, at a federal level, you are not allowed to impose a property tax unless it has to be uniform and apportioned. Any direct tax on a person or their property has to be apportioned equally amongst the states and uniform in its rate. That's impossible, politically impossible in the modern world to achieve. Our founders intended it that way because they didn't want any head taxes. They didn't want any federal property taxes. They only wanted indirect taxes on foreign goods, like President Trump is talking about. When he talks about shifting to a tariff-based model, he's talking about shifting to the model our founders believed in was necessary to not only benefit the economy, but to protect freedom and autonomy from government control. The power to tax is the power to destroy. The power to tax is the power to control. That's what much of our tax returns are really about. They're ratting yourself out on a daily basis. Folks, they can print their own money. They don't need your check. What they want is your control, your subservience, your submission. And here you've got one of the most independent people in the world preaching and teaching people how to not be submissive to central planners and to individually empower themselves around the globe. It's not a coincidence that he's the one that's being targeted. But if they want to use him as the example to establish an extraordinary new power to lock people up by making new tax policy through criminal enforcement. Because again, the exit tax is unconstitutional, always has been. This is the only case I know of where they're prosecuting somebody related to Bitcoin. When at the time that they're talking about, they leave this out, they omit this from the indictment. 2014, 2015, 2017. The IRS couldn't decide what Bitcoin even was. They couldn't even, is it a digital thing? Is it an actual asset? Is it an income stream? They couldn't figure it out. And now you're going to go to prison because the government can't figure out what something is? So that's problem number one. Problem number two is it's all while he's not a citizen. Problem number three is it's a disguised property tax, and they're trying to enforce this through criminal imprisonment. So this is a direct threat to everybody's freedom, and it's similar and comparable. What's happening to their efforts to crucify Bitcoin Jesus is the same as what crypto is fighting in crypto.com suing the Biden administration. It's about using enforcement to set new policy, not just to punish the dissidents they don't like and to send a censorship message. If you're thinking about opening your mouth and challenging what we do, you might end up like Bitcoin Jesus. Look at how well we crucified him. We made the Romans look amateurs by comparison. That's what they're trying to do with Roger Ver. They're trying to do the same in crypto in general, because they want to use criminal individualized enforcement to create policy that they could never constitutionally pass in the first.
Amazing. When do we find out if he gets extradited?
I assume that's months away. So maybe Spain will have some cojones and recognize the unconstitutional and illegal nature of the process. Guess where they got most of their info if you read the indictment? It's private communications between he and his lawyers. This was actually, I didn't realize that this case until I was looking at it recently. This was the case that went up before the U.S. Supreme Court that we talked about. The tax firm was saying, Why is a court allowing any look at any attorney-client information based on it being for dual purpose, which is a bunch of hogwash? Just remind everybody, never in writing, always in cash. But what's amazing is you read the quotes from his lawyer. It's like, this is the evidence of someone trying to comply with the law, not someone trying to not comply with the law. But it's like, what are they doing with his attorney-client files in the first place? I mean, they just violate all the rules. But they basically they're using the Trump case as a template for how they can go after any dissident. We can set new policy. We can break all the rules. We can manipulate the venue. We can eviscerate privilege. We can target people we dislike as our sin goat sacrificial offering. And it's part of a systematic problem with this administration.
But Roger Ver, he's not in jail right now in Spain. McAfee was in jail in Spain when he allegedly took his
probably
own life.
Spain figured out, don't trust the U.S. government, number one, when they come saying, let's extradite somebody. Number two, they should be like, hold on, a tax case? You want to extradite somebody for tax when he wasn't even a U.S. citizen during the time period that you're trying? Well, hold on a second. They could do that to anybody in Spain, couldn't they? They could do that to anybody anywhere. I mean, imagine if tomorrow Russia decides they can tax the whole world and they can issue an extradition request and have us brought there, or China. There's a reason why we have territorial limitations on these powers. This is why Trump is talking about, I'm going to get rid of this altogether. If you're outside the United States, I'm not going to tax you anymore. No, only crazy countries do that in the first place or even try to. But that at least is on citizens, not on non-citizens. It's just extraordinary. But clearly the Spanish courts smelled a rat early on. Granted him bail despite the request initially by the U.S. government, I'm sure, to try to detain him and imprison him pending trial proceedings. And if they follow through conscientiously in ways the British court mostly failed to do in the Assange case, then his extradition should be rejected. So I'm sure it's probably not a coincidence. Roger Ver is affiliated and associated in the public mind with people like Julian Assange, a very independent freedom advocate for people that has been obviously effective at getting under the skin of the deep state, the administrative state. But it's just a case to pay more attention to because of how problematic it is and how they're trying to use the case, not only to punish dissidents, not only to suppress financial freedom and Bitcoin, but also because of how they want to create new policy through selective criminal enforcement in ways that would impose a property tax on the entire world and tax people who aren't even citizens, who aren't even part of in the United States. It's as crazy a case as you can possibly imagine. Biden administration then has learned to master crazy cases.